So, if you are lonely, maybe you haven't had too many successful relationships, you feel like you failed in the love department, you're wrong. And I'm going to explain to you why. But first, let me tell you a love story. Kind of. Back in ye old 90s, when I was in college, I had a BFF. When you tell a story about all the stupid you did when you were young, there's that one friend who's in like 95% of your stories, like was involved with 90% of all the mistakes you made in your youth. That's who this friend was. We were tight. We did a lot of things together. We were sort of a really unstable frog and toad. What you need to understand about friend and myself is that if the word non-binary had been a thing back in those days, if there had been kind of a wider social conversation about gender identity, transgender people, or things like complex trauma, and if we had really had access to good information, both of us most likely would have made kind of different choices and had a different experience. At that time, we were both very apparently a male and a female. This was a 150% like platonic relationship. If a sexual attraction had happened or been possible between us, I think we could easily have had a very unhealthy marriage. We were a couple of very nerdy, angry, maladjusted humans, and we got along great. Friend was really into stuff like making electronic music and hating American capitalism and socializing on the internet. All of those things are like extremely normal now, but back in that time and place, they were not. We had a lot of stuff in common. And we were living at that time in a small college town together. 90% of what went on in said town was really dominated by college normalcy. No offense to you, if you went to college and you joined a fraternity or a sorority and you had a really good college experience, that is no disrespect to you. Like, I just wasn't into that stuff. I kind of didn't fit in. I never went out to the bar or the dining hall in a group of like 16 other girls. You know what I mean? And friend was not a college student at all. And we would sit together in front of computers discussing new ways to download software illegally, or attempting to find pirated copies of our favorite childhood cartoons. For you young people out there, you gotta remember, there is no YouTube back at this time. Like, if you thought a thought about a show you remembered from when you were a kid, and you wanted to, like, watch it or show it to somebody, you couldn't just whip a phone out of your pocket and look it up. Like, the only way to find stuff like that was to find some weirdo on the internet who had it and would upload it onto a really questionable website so you could download it, or you had to like comb through thrift stores and find the physical media. There was this one time in a thrift store, we found a VHS tape of all the Milli Vanilli videos. If you don't remember who Milli Vanilli was, I don't have time to explain this in this video. You're gonna have to Google it. We found this VHS tape and we watched it over and over and over. It became a prized possession. Yes, I know that's stupid. Friend and I were, I think, basically good people, but we both had really severe emotional regulation problems. Amongst our friend group, I think we were regarded as being difficult, but very smart and generally, like, worth the trouble. We used to have these extraordinarily bad fights about literally nothing. There was a time where we were in my car and we were fighting about something. I don't even remember what, but it was like too loud to scream at each other in the car, but it was raining outside, and friend said we had to get out of the car to continue the fight, and I thought that was stupid, and we had a fight about where we were gonna have a fight. One time, friend called me and said, please come get me from my house. I hate it here. And I was like, cool, I'll be right there. And in the 30 minutes it took me to get out of the house and drive to where they were, friend managed to cook and eat an entire 3-pound package of bacon. And then when we were driving to wherever we were driving, friend had the unmitigated gall to complain to me repeatedly that they felt sick. Friend was also really sweet and caring and helped me out with things at times. I remember when I got my wisdom teeth out, I was miserable and couldn't eat anything real. And they made a really nice lunch for me out of overcooked ramen noodles and Jell-O brand pistachio pudding. This was a meal that cost like 78 cents. Despite not being super functional in a lot of ways, friend was actually a very good cook. They had learned to cook from their grandmother, and we had absolutely no money ever. Friend really knew how to be poor. They used to come up with meals out of nothing. We just cook whatever was available. No shopping necessary. I remember one time they cooked me this breakfast of fried breakfast potatoes, and they used orange juice as like a simmer sauce. They put orange juice in the potatoes because that was just what was in the house. My hand to God, it worked. And they were the person that taught me things like, if you ran out of coffee filters, you could just use paper towels and it'll kind of work. I really admired how frugal and resourceful they knew how to be. Like, they were a mess, but they were also remarkably resilient in certain ways. And I really looked up to that. And I think this period in my life is where a lot of my own resourcefulness and resilience comes from. Friend was also into really weird art projects, like loved cutting up magazines and making bizarre collages and stuff like that. Like the kind of stuff I'm into, no other 18 to 22-year-olds were doing stuff like this. I remember one time they bought this inflatable couch. It was a plastic inflatable couch because they wanted a piece of furniture in their apartment and couldn't afford it. And we blew up the couch. They blew it up like using their mouth because they didn't have a pump. It took a really long time, but they blew up this couch and we walked up and down the main street through town and took pictures of random people sitting on the inflatable couch. And I think in a closet somewhere, I still have the collage of photos we made of people in town sitting on friend's inflatable couch. It was a lot of fun. So there was a time where friend and I really needed to lay low for a while because we had made ourselves very unpopular with the locals. We weren't like crazy partiers, but we were still young people. We wanted to go out to the bars sometimes and we wanted to drink and there's only so many bars in town. And one bar, I think friend had gotten fired from. And there was another bar that we could go to because I had pissed off some of the people that worked there over, I don't know, some shady dealings. There was no such thing as legal cannabis back then. If you've ever lived in a college town, you know that every bar kind of has its own culture in a small town. There's the hippie bar, Jane Normal bar. There's the crazy party frat bar. We couldn't go to the hippie bar. We couldn't go to the punk bar. And one night we were sitting in friend's apartment, which was in a pretty good location. And friend looked out across the street at the giant frat boy bar across the street. And this was one of these 90s sports bar places that was just full of, I'm sorry, there's no polite way to say this, privileged white douchebags. People that felt kind of scary and dangerous to us. The kind of people who would yell homophobic stuff out the window at people when they were walking down the street randomly. And I'm not saying that was everybody who was in the bar, but it attracted a lot of those types. And I remember in the back they had this carpet that had pictures of baseball gloves and basketballs and footballs all over it. It looked like the carpeting a 10-year-old would have put in their bedroom. And it had a lot of video games and like the foosball table. It was sort of like somebody gave Chuck E. Cheese a liquor license. It was like people who were emotionally about 9 years old were in there drinking alcohol. But we were sitting there one night looking at this bar across the street, and friend just said, "You know something? If we go over there and we go in the back where nobody can see us from the street, nobody's ever gonna find us. Nobody's ever gonna think to come looking for us there. Nobody we know is going in there." And it worked. It was a perfect hiding place. And we just drank cheap beer, and that became our spot for a little while. Then one day there was a really stupid incident where we went in there and I gave them my debit card to open a tab. It happened to be the day that my debit card was expiring, and we handed the guy the card, and they were able to like open the tab. Maybe things worked differently back then. This is so stupid, but they were able to open the tab. But the problem was when we went to close out our tab, it was like 12:17 a.m. and they were not able to actually close it out because the card had expired. I don't remember exactly how this got resolved, but I think the gist of it was we just didn't pay our bill, and thus we were no longer able to show our faces in that place anymore either. So then we had to start getting really creative about places to go. And one of the spots we found was a Howard Johnson's. I think Howard Johnson's still exists. In America, it's known as being like a chain of like budget hotels mostly. But where we lived, the Howard Johnson's, which was outside of town, it was just a little restaurant that really only old people ever went to. It was like Wolfie's from the Golden Girls, only not cool at all. And if you went in there in the middle of the afternoon, it would be full of nice little old ladies in there with their walkers who were like, maybe they had just gone to some church club meeting and they were in there having their lunch. So one day, a friend and I were in this place enjoying our entrees, and it was the kind of restaurant that would like serve canned vegetables as a side dish for like $2, which was an outrageous price at the time. Although now that I think about it, if you go to the grocery store and buy a can of canned vegetables, it probably costs more than that now. But one of the things on the menu was a side of creamed corn, which was a stupid food no one ever ate except really old people. The waiter walked by us and casually set down a side dish of creamed corn on the table, exactly between us. And we proceeded to have a fight in the middle of the full Howard Johnson's about who the creamed corn belonged to. Absolutely disregarding all the nice little old ladies and the wait staff around us. We have this idiotic argument about creamed corn. And when the fight is over, there's a pause. And if you were wondering what the point of me telling you this story is, here it is. Friend has this quiet, introspective moment, and they say, when we get really old, do you think maybe we could try to get into the same nursing home together? Like, you probably don't have to stay there for the rest of your life, because I'll die first, and then once I'm gone, you can just leave. But do you think maybe we could do that? You know what that is? That's f***ing love. And I said, yeah, let's make a plan. Let's do that. And by the way, friend, if you happen to be watching right now, I'm still good for that offer. We can still go to the same nursing home. And I'm sitting here this morning, like, I don't know, something like 30 years later. And a lot of things have happened since then, and I have been a lot of people, and I've gone through a lot of things, and I've had a lot of relationships, and most of them I would have to technically categorize as abysmal failures. But I'm at a place now where I am really happy and at peace with myself and my life and the person who I have become. And that memory randomly just came to me, and it was just like, wow, What a sweet and lovely moment that really was in my life. And at the time, I completely missed it. We have so many moments of love in our lives that we disregard, dismiss, and basically just miss out on because they don't come to us packaged in the way we think they're supposed to look. They don't look like the kind of love we see in the movies. They don't look like what the world has told us love is supposed to look like. So if you're feeling a little bit down about yourself right now and your romantic situation, if you feel like nobody's ever going to love you, your belief that nobody is ever going to love you is based on perhaps the notion that nobody ever really has, I want you to sit down and think of as many moments like that you have had in your life. Think of the quiet, still moments where there was like a real kind of love and connection between you and another person. And remember that is what love actually is. I hope some of that made some sense.